There are moments in life when we feel as though we're fighting against the entire world. But what's even more frightening is when we no longer want to fight at all, not because the obstacles are too great, but because something within us has begun to quietly let go. We live in an age of noise, of pressure, and of relentless expectations. And in the midst of that storm, we sometimes find ourselves asking, how do we hold on to peace, reason, and inner resolve? The answer doesn't always lie in a new book or a well-crafted piece of advice, but in the way a man lived nearly 1,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius. He was not only the emperor of Oi, but a ruler of his own mind, governed by discipline, reason, and an uncanny clarity of awareness, not through force of arms, but through 10 habits, simple yet powerful. Marcus overcame chaos, pain, and temptation to become a model of steadfastness. And now, we too can begin that journey from within. 1. Practice small acts of excellence every day. Marcus Aurelius was not born great. He did not grow up in ideal conditions, had no guarantee of fortune, and never shied away from the burdens of imperial duty. What set him apart was the decision to live excellently each day, not through grand gestures, but by repeating small acts with unwavering awareness. For Marcus, greatness wasn't found in extraordinary moments, but in the consistency of daily habits maintained regardless of circumstance. He didn't wait for inspiration or the perfect timing. Instead, he trained himself by rising on time, completing his tasks without delay, mastering his words and thoughts, and maintaining discipline in action, even when no one was watching. The excellence Marcus pursued wasn't for display, nor was it meant to earn recognition. He didn't aim to impress or to prove superiority. On the contrary, he held himself to a high standard and lived by it, whether or not anyone noticed. In his surviving writings, Marcus repeatedly emphasized doing what is right, even when there is no reward. This was an excellence forged from within, unteached by outside judgment or social validation. He believed that true character is revealed in how we act when no one sees us. And so, for him, self-mastery over even the smallest behaviors, from thoughts and words to how we respond to others, was where inner strength took root. Marcus Aurelius viewed everyday habits as tools for cultivating virtue, choosing silence over fruitless arguments, showing patience in the face of irrationality, or giving full attention to a task despite fatigue. These were not trivial acts in his eyes. To him, nothing was insignificant if it served the goal of becoming rational and morally grounded. He did not let fleeting emotions govern his choices. When insulted, he did not lash out. When misunderstood, he didn't rush to explain. When successful, he resisted pride. All of it was the result of disciplined training, repeating the right actions every day until they became part of who he was. To Marcus, the pursuit of excellence wasn't a destination, but a mode of being. He didn't treat it as a goal to reach, but as a way to exist amid a chaotic world. He understood that life constantly presents challenges, frustrating situations, disappointing people, and disruptive emotions. They never stop coming, and there is only one way not to be undone by them: build a strong inner foundation. He believed that if a person can remain steadfast in doing what's right, bit by bit, day after day, that person becomes strong and trustworthy, without needing titles or accolades to prove it. Practicing small acts of excellence daily, in Marcus's eyes, wasn't about standing out. It was about staying grounded. In a world full of temptations, distractions, and pretense, it is precisely these small but correct habits that keep us anchored to our better selves. Marcus did not pursue excellence because it was easy. He chose it because he knew it was the only path to self-possession, peace of mind, and an enduring character that no external force could ever take away. 2. Self-reflection, the habit of the wise. In the writings Marcus Aurelius left behind, his frequent inner dialogues were never unconscious or random. They were intentional acts of reflection. To him, reflection was a tool for correcting, purifying, and realigning thoughts, emotions, and behaviors with reason and virtue. He refused to let a single day pass without looking inward. Before sleep, he would write down what he had done, thought, and felt, not to blame himself, but to better understand who he was. To Marcus, knowing oneself was no less important than knowing the world. Reflection revealed hidden flaws masked by success, subtle emotions shaping reactions, and small errors in thought that could one day lead to serious consequences. This habit required no special conditions, just a quiet moment and complete honesty with oneself. Marcus didn't write for others, so there was no need to embellish or hide. That raw transparency made his self-reflection a sharp instrument for inner growth. He viewed his mind as a garden. Left untended, weeds would spread. Emotions like anger, envy, or pride could sprout from unchecked thoughts. Only through reflection could one see them clearly and uproot them. It was a daily ritual of mental cleansing, like washing the soul at day's end. Marcus believed that those who do not reflect move through life like travelers in the dark without a lamp. They act out of habit, react on impulse, and are easily swept away by momentary emotions. In contrast, those who pause to observe themselves begin to shape their lives rather than be shaped by them. Reflection helped him resist the illusions of ego, the seduction of praise, and the sting of failure. Every action, every word, every decision was held up to the light of reason to see if it aligned with his moral ideals. If it did, he reinforced it. If it didn't, he adjusted, without judgment or denial, simply changing course. Marcus went beyond examining actions. He questioned the motives behind them. He would ask himself, why am I doing this? For justice or for self-interest? For truth or for recognition? These simple questions kept his heart and mind anchored to the path he had chosen. He refused to deceive himself with comforting excuses. In that radical honesty, he found the strength to correct mistakes, begin again, and grow from within. Self-reflection didn't make him cold or harsh. It gave him clarity and calm in a chaotic, impulsive world. As emperor, Marcus held supreme power, and few who dared to challenge him. Yet it was reflection that became his harshest teacher. He never allowed himself to be intoxicated by greatness or authority. Each day, he returned to himself like a student, revisiting his moral lessons. This practice preserved his humility, his consistency in action, and his ability to lead with wisdom rather than control. He believed that if one could observe oneself with honesty and courage day after day, they would grow, not for the applause of others, but through the quiet evolution of the soul. 3. Accepting people instead of expecting them to change. As a Roman emperor, Marcus Aurelius lived in a world filled with conflict, betrayal, ambition, and people who behaved in ways that sharply contrasted with the moral standards he held dear. Yet he did not let these behaviors harden his heart or turn him bitter toward life. Rather than nurturing the illusion that others should behave according to some ideal code, Marcus chose to accept human nature as it is. He understood that the world was not designed to meet the personal expectations of any individual, not even an emperor. This did not mean he condoned wrongdoing or surrendered to injustice, but reflected a deep awareness that people are diverse in character, limited in capacity, and driven by motives shaped by their unique life stories, family, society, experience, and wounds yet to heal. In his writings, Marcus often reminded himself that at the start of each day, he should be mentally prepared to meet the arrogant, the selfish, the ungrateful, and the unhaughty. But instead of resenting them, he believed the proper response was to recognize that such behavior is a product of their nature and circumstances. Expecting otherwise only breeds disappointment and anger, emotions that serve no purpose other than to disturb one's own inner peace. Marcus held that the only thing worth adjusting is our own response, because the one thing we can truly control is our own attitude and behavior. When others fell short of expectations, he didn't see it as a personal offense, but simply as part of the human condition. Marcus did not seek to change others through force or imposition, but through personal example. He believed that if we hope to influence someone, we must begin not with persuasive words, but with the steady demonstration of virtue in our own conduct. When witnessing poor behavior, he didn't rush to criticize or condemn. Instead, he asked, "Have I ever done the same? And would I have acted better if I were in their position?" This perspective kept him grounded in humility and compassion, two essential qualities in Stoic practice. After all, anger at someone else's flaws does not make them better. It only unkettles the one who is angry. For Marcus, accepting others did not mean abandoning moral standards. He still drew clear lines between right and wrong, remained faithful to his values, and upheld his principles. But he did not tie his happiness to whether others lived by those same values. This is a central point in Stoic thinking. The Stoic does not strive to control the external world, but to master the inner one. When someone acted wrongly, his focus was not on judgment, but on the question, have I done my part to remain calm and act rightly? With this mindset, he avoided pointless arguments, stayed out of fruitless anger, and preserved his sense of self amid the urge to reform others. Accepting people as they are, according to Marcus, is a form of practical wisdom that allowed him to live in harmony with the world without surrendering his personal values. It enabled him to remain composed in complex political, social, and human situations. By giving up the expectation of perfection in others, he positioned himself to face all manner of behavior without being shaken by negative emotion. This not only preserved the clarity of his judgment, but also protected his mental energy, so he could focus on what he could change himself. 4. Refrain from complaining. Cultivate strength from within. Throughout his life and reign, Marcus Aurelius faced a relentless tide of challenges: war, rebellion, plague, betrayal by those closest to him, and the inevitable flaws within himself. Yet among all the turbulence, what stands out is how rarely he complained in the writings he left behind. It wasn't because he felt no pain or disappointment, but because he deliberately chose a different posture toward adversity, one that was constructive, mindful, and grounded in mental discipline. Marcus believed that complaining was not only useless, but a drain on energy, a distraction from what truly needed attention. He wrote that when something happens against our will, our instinct is often to blame, to resent, or to lament. But none of those responses change reality. They only deepen the sense of helplessness and erode one's inner command. In the Stoic mindset Marcus consistently upheld, the external world lies beyond the control of any individual. We cannot dictate how others behave, how circumstances unfold, or which direction fate turns. What we can control is how we respond, what we choose to think, to feel, and to do in each moment. For this reason, he viewed complaining as a corrosive force that weakens self-mastery. When people complain, They fixate on the problem, not the solution. They cling to emotion rather than turn to reason. And in doing so, they shift from being active agents to passive victims of their situation. Marcus often emphasized that every hardship is an opportunity to train moral character. An insult is a chance to practice patience. A loss is a moment to strengthen acceptance. An unwelcome outcome is a test of inner resilience. If instead of complaining, one chooses to act rightly or remain silent in reason, the inner fortress grows stronger. As a result, the mind is no longer tossed about by emotional storms. For Marcus, strength did not come from controlling the world, but from not allowing the world to wound the soul. In his meditations, Marcus spoke of specific trials, criticism, betrayal, misunderstanding, and the weight of great responsibility. Yet rather than complain, he reminded himself that such burdens are part of life and serve as invitations to live the Stoic ideal. His refusal to complain was not indifference, but wisdom, and understanding that lamenting does not improve the situation, nor does it change others. Instead, he focused on doing what needed to be done with calm and clarity. Each time a trial appeared, he chose deliberate action over impulsive reaction, reason over emotion, and silent strength over fragile lamentation. Marcus Aurelius believed that the wise are those who remain composed in adversity without needing to prove it aloud. Amid profound upheaval, he maintained simplicity in living, restraint in speech, and serenity in demeanor. He held that real power lies in the ability to keep the soul steady in the face of injustice and misfortune. And one of the surest ways to preserve that inner power is to stop complaining. Instead, observe, adjust, and move forward through virtuous action. Refraining from complaint does not erase difficulty, but it preserves the dignity of being the master of oneself, untouched by circumstance. This was how Marcus trained his mind to be as steady as stone amid a storm, not by retreating, but by facing it without a single word of complaint. 5. Focus on what truly matters. Marcus Aurelius lived in a time of constant upheaval, where power, responsibility, and societal demands pressed in from all sides. As emperor of a vast empire, he faced hundreds of decisions each day, burdened by political, military, social, and personal concerns. Yet amidst the relentless stream of obligations, Marcus retained a rare ability: the discipline to focus on what truly mattered. He believed time and attention were among humanity's most precious assets, and if scattered on trivial matters, the mind would lose its clarity and fail to uphold its ideals. In his writings, Marcus often reminded himself not to concern his mind with what didn't deserve it. He recognized that much of life is simply noise, idle gossip, meaningless praise or criticism, fruitless arguments, and relationships lacking goodwill. Engaging with these things drained mental energy and pulled one away from life's true purpose. So he cultivated the habit of asking, "Is this really necessary?" Whenever faced with a demand on his time or attention, that question became a filter, helping him determine what deserved his energy and what could be left behind. In Stoic thought, this is how one keeps the mind clear, simple, and oriented toward its essential goals. Marcus also made a firm distinction between what lay within his control and what did not. What he could not influence, he set aside without further thought. He refused to waste mental and emotional effort on things that could not be changed. Instead, he focused all attention on what truly mattered, acting with virtue, fulfilling his duties with integrity, disciplining his mind, and responding to the world with composure. When faced with countless choices each day, he didn't act based on impulse or fleeting desire, but on whether the action served his highest ideals. This focus protected him from being misled by glamour or distraction and anchored him to the path he had chosen. As a ruler, Marcus was constantly required to make decisions that impacted thousands. Clarity in each decision demanded that he eliminate distractions wherever possible. He chose to do fewer things, but to do them with full presence. This not only preserved his effectiveness, but also shielded his mind from the exhaustion that comes from divided attention. He knew that when a person spreads their energy across too many pursuits, nothing is done well. But when they choose carefully and focus deeply, even small actions can carry enduring value. Marcus did not try to do everything, only what was necessary at the right time, in the right way. To Marcus Aurelius, focus was not just a skill, it was a moral virtue, because when one allows the mind to drift into distraction, they don't just lose productivity, they lose themselves. He saw distraction as a quiet betrayal of one's purpose and simplicity as the path back to what truly matters. By focusing on the essential, Marcus fulfilled not only his imperial responsibilities, but also maintained a mind rooted in clarity, consistency, and peace, even in a world full of noise and unrest. 6. Gratitude in all circumstances, seeing light in the darkness. In the writings of Marcus Aurelius, gratitude appears not as a fleeting emotion, but as a deliberate and disciplined choice. He didn't express thanks as a social formality, but showed deep appreciation for every condition, situation, and person that had shaped his life. Marcus was grateful not only for what was pleasant, but also for hardship, adversity, and even those who had caused him pain. In his view, every experience, whether uplifting or difficult, was an essential part of cultivating virtue and inner maturity. For without adversity, patience cannot be forged. Without loss, the value of what we have remains unceasing. And without betrayal, honesty cannot be recognized as a rare and noble trait. Marcus Aurelius emphasized that gratitude should not depend on favorable conditions. Instead, it must be trained as a proactive stance toward life. Even during illness, opposition, or personal grief, he found reasons to be thankful. Grateful for the chance to act rightly. Grateful for pain, which reminded him of impermanence and the preciousness of each moment. Grateful for adversity, which revealed who was truly loyal and who was only present in times of ease. He wrote that trials do not break us, so long as we face them with a clear mind and an undependent spirit. In this approach, gratitude becomes a shield for the soul against bitterness, disappointment, and resentment. To Marcus, gratitude was closely tied to virtue. A grateful person finds it easier to act kindly, justly, and with tolerance. They don't demand that the world bend to their desires, but instead learn to value what they have and use it responsibly. Marcus frequently acknowledged those who had taught him, guided him, or even challenged him. People who helped clarify the moral path he sought to walk. He never took success for granted. He credited the collective effort, the philosophical tradition, and the lessons earned through personal struggle. In his daily life, Marcus practiced gratitude by not wasting the chance to live in alignment with his values. He did not postpone right action because of temporary feelings. He didn't dismiss small acts if they contributed to a virtuous life. For him, each passing day was a gift, not because it was easy, but because it offered one more opportunity to grow in spirit. When reflecting on death, he didn't express regret or fear. Instead, he gave thanks for the time he had and for having tried to live it fully. This reveals that in Stoic thought, gratitude is not a fleeting sentiment, but a sustained mental state, rooted in reason and a deep understanding of life's nature. Marcus Aurelius believed that when gratitude becomes part of one's way of being, a person is no longer so easily shaken by circumstance, because peace no longer depends on getting what one wants, but on the ability to find value, even in what one did not wish for. And from that clarity comes self-mastery, courage, and moral strength, held firm in a world that is ever-changing and uncertain. 7. Lifelong learning, from people, books, and pain. Marcus Aurelius stood as a model of unceasing learning, regardless of rank, circumstance, or stage of life. Though emperor of a vast empire, he never saw himself as complete, nor did he treat knowledge as a final destination. In his personal writings, he often expressed gratitude for the teachers who shaped his mind and character. From philosophers like Sextus to family members who instilled in him essential values, he viewed every person as part of a living archive of wisdom, open to learn from anyone, regardless of their status or role. This humility toward knowledge allowed him to stay alert and open to the ever-shifting nature of life. Marcus didn't confine learning to books. While he valued reading and made time for regular study and reflection, he also stressed the importance of learning through lived experience, especially moments of hardship, pain, and challenge. To him, it was the harshest conditions that tempered the mind, where theory was tested and transformed into practical wisdom. When facing betrayal, loss, or political unrest, Marcus didn't treat these as burdens, but as chances to observe, to analyze, and to understand human nature and his own more deeply. He didn't try to escape pain, but faced it directly as an essential part of spiritual growth. In his view, pain does not weaken us if we are willing to learn from it. Marcus Aurelius sustained his learning by writing down his thoughts daily. This was not merely a memory aid, but a form of reflection through which learning took shape. In writing, he was forced to confront vague thoughts, unresolved emotions, and inner contradictions. Each entry was a step toward mental clarity, a way of teaching himself through honest inner dialogue. He didn't write for others to read, but to understand more clearly what he knew, and to recognize what he had yet to grasp. This mode of learning wasn't about pride or intellectual accumulation. It was a path toward living with reason and moral integrity. In Marcus's view, learning wasn't a phase of life. It was the essence of an awakened existence. Learning doesn't end with a bookshelf full of wisdom or a title of influence. On the contrary, the more one matures, the deeper one must learn, not just about the outer world, but about the inner one. He believed that when a person stops learning, they begin to decay, not just intellectually, but ethically. Learning cultivates humility, for the more one knows, the more one sees what is yet unknown. It also deepens compassion, because understanding others' motives and limitations makes one less judgmental and more empathetic. Marcus Aurelius believed that knowledge should never remain abstract. If it does not translate into action and daily decisions, it becomes a burdensome weight. For that reason, he didn't learn to know. He learned to live. Everything he absorbed found its way into practice, from emotional control to interpersonal conduct, to the way he led and made choices. His was a lifelong pursuit of knowledge, deep, steady, and unbroken by ease or adversity. 8. Forgive yourself. Forgive others. In his practice of Stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius placed special emphasis on the role of forgiveness, both toward oneself and toward others. As ruler of an empire, he frequently encountered mistakes, from the misjudgments of subordinates, betrayal by trusted allies, to failures born from his own decisions. Yet in his private writings, Marcus never allowed those failures to become sources of lasting bitterness or relentless self-blame. He saw forgiveness as essential to maintaining inner peace and protecting one's strength from being drained by corrosive emotions. To him, forgiveness was not weakness or indulgence, but a reflection of reason and a deep understanding of human nature. Marcus understood that no one is perfect. Every person acts within the limits of their perception, circumstances, and emotions at a given moment. When others did wrong, instead of reacting with prolonged anger, he tried to look for the root behind the behavior. He believed that if people truly understood what was right, they wouldn't knowingly do wrong. Therefore, most errors stem from ignorance, fear, or emotional states beyond the person's current control. Seeing things this way, he avoided personalizing harm and was quicker to release his anger before it could anchor itself in his mind. In the same spirit, Marcus continually reminded himself to show compassion toward his own flaws. When he made mistakes, he didn't excuse or deny them. He acknowledged them with honesty. Yet he also refused to spiral into guilt, knowing that guilt without correction brings no growth. He chose to learn, extract the lesson, and commit to doing better next time. This was a rational process, not driven by extremes of emotion. Forgiving oneself in Marcus's eyes was the only way to keep walking the ethical path without being dragged down by what's already past. Marcus also recognized that unresolved anger silently distorts the clarity of the mind. It leads to irrational actions, biased judgment, and behaviors that betray one's moral ideals. For this reason, forgiveness wasn't just about releasing others from blame. It was a way to protect one's own inner state. Forgiveness, from a Stoic perspective, intentional act. It doesn't depend on apologies or remorse from others, but on the conscious decision to live with a tranquil heart. It is the choice to sever ties with emotions that no longer serve spiritual growth. Maintaining compassion never weakened Marcus's leadership. On the contrary, it helped him stay fair in judgment and consistent in conduct. He did not allow personal emotions to interfere with governance or political relationships. In doing so, he built a leadership model rooted in reason, not in vengeance or emotional reaction. This was most evident in how he handled those who had betrayed or harmed him, not through retaliation, but by keeping the system stable and refusing to let one person derail the ideals he upheld. Marcus Aurelius showed that in a world constantly changing, where mistakes and wounds are inevitable, forgiveness is a conscious choice that preserves inner strength. Forgiveness does not erase memory or justify wrong, but it prevents the negative from contaminating the present. Through it, one can continue living with awareness, self-control, and calm, staying centered even when the world outside is in turmoil. 9. Live by values, not by impulse. Marcus Aurelius spent much of his life reflecting on, writing about, and practicing a core principle that we must live according to values we believe are right, rather than be swayed by passing inspiration or fluctuating emotions. He believed that values are the only solid foundation for maintaining inner stability and consistency in action, especially in moments of difficulty or chaos. In contrast, if one lets temporary feelings lead, they will quickly change direction, break their own principles, and lose their sense of purpose. That's why Marcus constantly reminded himself to stay anchored in reason, so that every action would be guided by virtue and long-term purpose, not by short-term pleasure or external pressure. In his writings, Marcus made clear his relentless effort to ask, does this action align with my ideals? Does it reflect the character I seek to build? And does it help me become a better person? He didn't just write down what should be done. He routinely examined whether he had lived up to it. For him, living by values wasn't a theoretical exercise, but a sequence of concrete actions in speech, in conflict, in decision-making, and in response to adversity. What mattered was keeping reason present in every moment, even when emotions surged. Marcus Aurelius believed that values like integrity, humility, patience, kindness, and justice should not remain as abstract thoughts or words, but must show up consistently in real behavior. He didn't believe in merely professing moral beliefs. He emphasized that how one lives daily is the true measure of character. In his view, there is no gap between theory and practice. If someone cannot live by what they claim to believe, they haven't truly understood the value. Thus, to live by values means not only choosing what is right, but staying faithful to that choice, even when it brings hardship, sacrifice, or misunderstanding. Marcus also warned against the danger of chasing inspiration, since human emotions are unstable, easily swayed by circumstance, by others, and even by bodily conditions. What feels appealing in the moment may later become the source of regret. Therefore, building a clear system of values and sticking to it in all situations is the only way to preserve consistency and resilience. He stressed that living by values isn't always easy, but each small choice matters. Every time we choose reason over emotion, truth over convenience, or keep a promise when it's no longer easy for us, we move closer to spiritual maturity. Living by values also helped Marcus resist the temptations of power and personal gain. As emperor, he could have used authority for his own ends, but he chose instead to act with justice and fairness. He didn't allow power to cloud the moral standards he had set for himself. This shows that living by values is more than a private commitment. It's a way to preserve integrity and self-respect in every situation. By staying true to that principle, Marcus was able to make difficult decisions without being shaken by passing emotions or others' opinions. Marcus Aurelius believed that when a person lives by their values, they no longer need outside validation to feel right. They draw strength from within, from knowing they acted in the best way possible, given their ability and the situation at hand. And from that inner resilience, they can live simply but deeply, calmly amidst change, and remain self-possessed no matter how turbulent the world becomes. 10. Recovering yourself after each fall. Throughout his rule in daily life, Marcus Aurelius openly admitted that he was not immune to error. As a man, despite carrying the weight of an empire, he frequently faced moments where he failed to control his emotions, maintain reason, or treat others as he ought to. Yet instead of letting these lapses become reasons to stop or lose faith in himself, Marcus consistently returned to a core Stoic principle. What matters is not never failing, but calmly and resolutely returning to the right path. He saw recovering oneself after each misstep as an essential part of ethical training and inner growth. In his personal writings, Marcus described the act of restoring inner balance after a fall as both conscious and deliberate. He didn't let disappointment linger, nor did he let self-blame dictate future behavior. Instead, he observed what had occurred, identified the cause of the lapse, and gently brought himself back to reason. This process wasn't harsh or punitive, but more like re-establishing a good habit after a brief interruption. He believed the mind must be trained to avoid both harshness and leniency. Harshness paralyzes, leniency enables. True balance lies in honest recognition, followed by learning and redirection, free from the pull of the past. Marcus Aurelius saw each failure as a reminder of human imperfection, and that it is in weakness where the capacity for resilience is truly tested. He never expected perfect clarity at all times. Instead, he focused on reducing the time it took to return to reason. In his philosophy, One mistake does not erase an entire path, and a moment of indulgence does not invalidate a life of discipline. So his aim was not flawlessness, but continuity, a steady commitment to realign with his ideals, even after temporarily drifting from them. To Marcus, restoration couldn't happen if one drowned in guilt or endless regret. Such emotions, when unregulated by reason, become barriers to progress. That's why he chose to acknowledge his errors, then immediately shift his focus from the problem to the solution. Each day was a new chance, and he treated beginning again as a natural part of inner life. The return didn't need to be dramatic or outwardly visible. It was simply the quiet act of patience, of choosing what's right again, as though there had been no interruption. Marcus Aurelius also emphasized that consistency does not depend on motivation or good moods. Emotions are fleeting. What defines strength is the ability to return to reason after each detour. He didn't wait for inspiration to act rightly. Instead, he built a stable framework of values to guide him even in his most difficult moments. That act of returning, repeatedly, without excuse, is what shaped his disciplined mind and unshakable spirit. Marcus believed that only when one accepts their limits, vulnerabilities, and tendency to err, can they truly develop the power to recover, not by avoidance, but through honesty, intention, and clarity. We don't need to be emperors to live like Stoic. The practices Marcus Aurelius followed each day, reflection, patience, discipline, and gratitude, are all fully applicable to modern life. I believe that in an age where everyone is rushing, simply pausing to observe our inner world is already an extraordinary act. We often strive to change others, change circumstances, even change the world, yet forget that the only change we truly control is ourselves. We may still make mistakes, still get angry, still complain, but the difference is that each time we pause, recalibrate, and return to our core values, that is not weakness, that is strength. I've come to realize that when we choose to live by consistent principles, nothing around us, no matter how chaotic, can truly shake us. We no longer live at the mercy of emotion, but by reason and a deep understanding of what is right. And every time we do that, even in the smallest way, like staying calm when insulted, or choosing silence over unnecessary words, we take a step closer to true inner freedom. If you found value in what you just heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future content on Stoicism and personal growth. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need a clearer and stronger sense of direction in today's world. See you in the next video.